see most of y'all awake. For those online that didn't know, we just had a big meal. We had breakfast for dinner, and sausage gravy, sausage, fruit, casseroles, eggs, waffles, you name it, we had it. We had a lot of fun, but we're a little full. So if they're quiet tonight, there are people out there. But it is good to see everybody. Last week we were finishing up in Psalm 13. And I just wanted just a quick reminder of what was going on and what we were doing. In Psalm 13, it started out, David, the first verses is how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Many times a lot of us have been in situations, that our timing doesn't line up with God's timing, and we just may be hurting, or we may be waiting, we see David doing this at times. We see David writing about this, and that's one of the things I've grown to love about David is his honesty and his willingness to share his feelings. But it starts out with such struggle there at the beginning of 13, but he finishes it off, which I have up here on the thing in verse 5 and 6. It says, "But I trust your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me." So David still trusts in the Lord. And that's something we need to remember. Though when we hit our peaks and we hit our valleys, because we will, God's still there in the peaks. God's still there in the valleys. When we're doing great and we're going, thank you, God, thank you. When we're in the bottom too, we can't forget He's there just like He was before. But with that, as we move on into Psalms 14, I'm going to read it. It's only 7 verses. We're going to step back and look through it. And it starts out, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt, their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. All have turned away. All have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Do all the evildoers know nothing? They devour my people as though eating bread. They never call on the Lord. But there they are, overwhelmed with dread. For God is present in the company of the righteous. You evildoers frustrate the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, the salvation for Israel would come. Oh, that the salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores His people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad." So starting out, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. They were atheists back then. Just like they're atheists now. I don't really think of, I think atheism and most of this stuff going on now, I kind of think of it as a modern day phenomenon or thing, but it's not. We see right here where it says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Same old problems, aren't we? Same old problems. 3,400-ish kind of years ago, running into the same thing then as we run into now. David goes on to say that they are corrupt, their deeds are vile. There is no one that does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind. You understand? It's all mankind. That's Jews and Gentiles now. He sees us all. To see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. All have turned away. All have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. today in our world, it seems like we're definitely in the very, very minority. You know, you have atheists, you have agnostics that believe that, there's probably God, but it's not God. You have others that believe in little g gods. I realized some of us didn't follow it when I said little g because I didn't explain it all the way, but somebody help me out there. Man, what we're dealing with is nothing new. Even though we think, well, it's 2020. It's got to be new, but it's not. Isn't that how we look back at this? Not only we can see how David struggled and how he poured out his heart and what a human being he was, we can also see the same things he was dealing with then we can deal with today. Has anybody ever thought, man, I wish God would just come on back and let's get done with all this stuff? I mean, that's kind of what I've thought it. I'm kind of like, there'll be a lot of people lost. Oh, maybe not, but I wouldn't have to put up with some of this stuff, if he did. But right there at the end, in verse 7, David says that too. He says, "Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion when the Lord restores his people. Let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad." You can't blame it on him. I can't blame him either because he's gone through some rough periods. We've just seen all these Psalms where he was just pouring out his heart, how, people trying to kill him, people chasing him, and he's looking at the world saying, "No, is anyone trying to follow God?" And yet, we see that and sometimes think that today as well. It's amazing, it's funny. We see this all the time. We've seen this. If you look back to the 16, 17, 18, 1900s, and people are saying, "Oh, I can't get any worse than this." And it does, or, well, God's got to be coming back any time now because of this or that. I remember a book when, and I'm not making this up, I remember a book when I was just out of high school about Boris Yeltsin, how he was the Antichrist and how his birthmark thing was a sign and all that stuff. And I bought it and read it, and my mom saw it, and she was like, "Really? Come on." Nobody knows. I'm like, yeah, that does make a lot more sense than this. But, people have always been thinking, it's so bad. It's got to be any time. But it's been so bad for a long time. But we pick back up. I love David's question in 4. He says, "Do all these evildoers know nothing? They devour my people as though eating bread. They never call on the Lord, but there they are, overwhelmed with dread. For God is present in the company of the righteous." Just a couple of things. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God." Then we see, but there they are, overwhelmed with dread. Why would they be overwhelmed with dread? Thank you, Dennis.
God gives it to them.
Yeah. They know God exists.
They're scared.
They don't want to, they're chasing. Why are they devouring the people like bread? They're chasing something to fill that hole, to get rid of that feeling, to get rid of that dread. They're chasing. They've got a hole that needs to be filled that can't be filled by anybody but God, and they're trying to find anything in the world and everything in the world they can to do it, and it ain't going to work. Pretty much.
In Deuteronomy 28, it talks about you wake up in the morning and you say, "I wish it were evening." And then the evening you say, "I wish it were morning."
Yep.
Because they weren't following God.
Yep. We've talked about that many times. Those of you that have been over to Canterfield, we've been talking about joy and talking about Paul. And last week we talked about Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ, and how misused that verse is in today's thing. You know, we see people with eye makeup on. Don't get me wrong, I really like Tim Tebow as a football player, but he had Philippians 4:13 on there. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But that's not, I mean, Paul wasn't saying, you know, God will make you a super Christian. You put on your cape, leap tall buildings with a single bound, stuff like that. That's not what that's not what that verse is about. It's about, if you look at the preceding, look at the context of the verse. He said, I know what it's like to be rich. I know what it's like to be poor, to have plenty, to have nothing. And through all of this, it's a better way to put it, through all of this, I can do all of this through Christ who strengthens me. He was talking about focus there. He was talking about, you know, when I remember who I'm served, where I'm going to be, it helps me get through. God helps me get through these things. It's not a I'm going to win this football game, and don't anybody take that as bashing Tim Tebow or anything like that. This is not meant like that, but it's a very prominent example. But many people preach that you know, you can do anything, doesn't matter what it is. Well, that's not the context, and I've gotten way out of sorts here. But as I regress, I'm sorry. But a couple other things there. But when we see where it says the Lord looks down from heaven on all of mankind, that happened a couple times in Genesis, remember? Lord looked down after all he created and said, it is good. And, chapter 1. Chapter 6, though, right before the flood, he looks down and said all was bad, except for Noah. You know, so God is always watching. Not just then, but now as well. Then here it says, you evildoers, this is David, of course, talking to the people. It says, you evildoers frustrate the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. Sometimes we think about it a lot too, but let's move on to Psalm 15. This is another one of David's Psalms, and these are the much more uplifting ones than the one where we see him so beat down to say. We have, it starts out, Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one who walks in is blameless. The one who does what is righteous. Who speaks the truth from their heart. Whose tongue utters no slander. Who does no wrong to a neighbor. And casts no slur on others. Who despises a vile person, but honors those who fear the Lord. Who keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind. Who lends money to the poor without interest. Who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will not be shaken. Wow, in 5 verses, David covers a lot of territory there. He starts out and says, he basically asks the question, who's going to be saved? Who will be saved? I mean, David knows this, but he's saying, all of this stuff going on, we've seen the others, who's going to be saved? And so David steps in and let's keep in mind, what were the Psalms? They would be like us taking our hymnal to an extent today, and people reading it 3,400-ish something years from now. These were meant to be sung. A lot of them even have different tempo markings and different things. But imagine this being sung, if you will. Who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? And then they go on to tell one another in their singing, the one who is blameless, who does what is righteous. They do the right thing. Who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, reminding each other, don't lie. Who does no wrong to a neighbor and casts no slur on others. Golden rule, maybe? Who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord. Who keep an oath even when it hurts. Boy, How about today? I told you I'd do that, but that's going to cost me a little bit too much. Or that's going to take too much of my time. I mean, we see that in the world, don't we? All the time. Who lends money to the poor without interest. Who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. I mean, can you imagine that being sung, the temple steps? You walking in and you hear this being sung, or being part of the people singing this as a reminder to their brothers and sisters and to themselves. Hey, this is what we need to be doing now. Don't forget. Who's going to be able to live on God's mountain? These people. And it's pretty powerful. We stop and look at it and think about it. It's kind of a mini sermon amongst itself that's being sung to others. One who despises a foul person, but honor those who fear the Lord. How often is that done today? Is it at all done today? Man, who is glorified in this country? There are people out there, I promise. But musicians or football players or actresses and actors, right? Politicians. I'm sorry?
Rap stars.
Rap stars. I mean, it's just, we have it so backwards. I've talked about this a couple of times. We're glorifying or Kardashians, or Instagram stars. Let's put on almost no clothes and take some pictures looking like this and be popular on Instagram. Let's be honest. Let's be blunt. That's what they do. They get a lot of followers that way. You've seen the memes or my wife likes to remind them, little cartoons on Facebook. It says, scantily clad lady will get 100,000 shares. How much will this get? And it's generally like a person serving in the military. People sleeping on the ground or something. Like that. Trying to get people. Why are you paying attention to that stuff? These are the people that are people really doing things for you, and that's so true today as it was true then. Are we, when we want to look up to someone, we're telling our kids who to look up to or stuff like that, or at least pointing out people that are doing things. There's research scientists every day working to try to cure cancer, try to cure Parkinson's disease, or any number of things, trying to do good in this world, or missionaries, or people out there pounding the pavement to say, as the old statement goes, trying to do good. Choices Resource Center down here. It's just right around the corner. I'm not saying they're perfect. They're the best answer or whatever. But you know what? They're trying to help ladies who are in a bad situation, hopefully not get an abortion. They are Christian based. I'm a lot more glad for them than any celebrity. And we need to remember that as well. And David was kind of pointing this out as well. Obviously different people, different times sort of thing. But we as humans kind of get sometimes off. There's several. I like football. My son likes football. It's something we have in common. Quite a few of the people I like in football has nothing to do with the team necessarily. But you take somebody, specifically some of the ones we talk about, and the statement comes up many times, I've heard nothing bad about that guy. I've heard he's pretty clean and does it right. And then there's people that get caught up in things they shouldn't be in. And it's like, well, I ain't rooting for that team anymore. You know, and it's, you know, we got to keep our priorities, especially with our kids, but who they look up to. Because that's important. It's really important. And it's hard. Hard in this society. But moving on into 16. Do I have time here? Yeah, probably. No, probably. There we go. I'm going to read 16 anyway. I think we can do it. It says, "Keep me safe, my God." This is David again. "For in you I take refuge." Where do we take? I mean, this is just another reminder, you know. Where do we take refuge? Do we take refuge in our 401k or in our insurance plan or in our church? Or where? You know, there's a lot of things that we take refuge on. I'm not saying don't put money in your 401k or don't have good insurance. Nothing like that. Those are prudent things to do. But we need to remember who's in control of everything, because you never know what can happen. We need to remember where we take refuge and where our focus is and where we're focused on in the future. I say to my Lord, "You are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing." I say to the holy people who are in the land, "They are the noble ones in whom is all my delight." Isn't that awesome? Those who run after other gods, little g, will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods or take up their names on my lips. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will never be shaken. Therefore, y'all know I love therefores, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. Because of all that stuff he just talked about, his heart is glad and his tongue rejoices. His body will also rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. Salvation, resurrection. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. I say it's great that David here in 3 is talking about where he sees delight in his people who are righteous and noble. That brings him satisfaction. And he doesn't, well, you notice David doesn't, he's like, I'm not going to pour out libations of blood to such guys or even take up their names on my lips. He doesn't want it to have anything to do with those. And he's satisfied. You see there in 5, Lord, you are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. David's satisfied only in God. But I love this 6. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. You know, there's a lot of people that don't like the boundary lines. Who don't like, well, you know, the Bible says you shouldn't lie, or you shouldn't have an affair, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. There's a lot of people who don't like that. But they're cliffs. There are safety rails there for a reason. That's what our instructions are. Don't do this, don't do that. It's for our own good. But so many people don't realize that or don't want that in the world today and then. And yet we have David here saying the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Boundary lines. Don't go over there and do that. Stay out of that. Which David was told to do. David was told not to do things and certain things because he listened to the Lord. Who else? Even at night, my heart instructs me. Am I the only one that lays there at night thinking about things? I see you hear him giggling now, don't you? I think we all do a lot of times. When we know the Word, when we're in the Word, that is what comes to mind. Yet another way of instruction. Isn't that great? Man. Because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one day see decay. Salvation. Jesus' resurrection. A little bit of messianic in there. With all of that said, it's amazing how much David pours his heart out. We've seen the highs and we've seen the lows. We're going to start moving on. I wanted to cover, we covered quite a few of David's Psalms here over the last few weeks. Now we're going to move on to some of the more messianic ones and talk about that and more instructional ones. And there's Psalms of Psalms, it's there in the middle. It's not like one of the Gospels where you're reading about Jesus doing this or Jesus doing that. But when you take the time to look at it, read it, stop and think about what it's saying and think about who's writing it. You can even look, a lot of times you can see when they wrote it. Man, it sheds such enlightenment. But we're about out of time. We have 2 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and call it for tonight. Say goodbye to everybody online. I hope y'all are warm and comfortable. And we love y'all. We hope to see you soon.